The Commission came up with recommendations, key among them the enactment of a new legislation, Planning and Building Act, the establishment of an independent planning and building authority to control, manage and enforce standards in the building industry, and the adoption of a current setup of up-to-date planning and building regulations to accompany the new planning and building law. However, these recommendations remain unimplemented to date. In 2008, the private sector raised concerns on the outdated building laws and regulations at the Prime Minister's roundtable meeting. Consequently, the government responded to the outcry by establishing a broad-based committee comprising of public sector, academia, professionals, private developers, and human rights bodies to review the building laws and regulations. The Prime Minister launched the Building Laws and Regulation Review and Harmonization Committee in March 2009.
The committee comprised all the players who have diligently participated in this very noble process. I want to particularly acknowledge the role of the Ministry of Housing in coordinating this process. I am glad that the committee has finalized its work as per the terms of reference, and in this respect, they have come up with the draft bill and building code and the draft building regulations. The bill and regulations cover the built environment, including the design, building approval, maintenance, demolition, and disposal. There are multiple physical planning institutions that are not coordinated and lack the capacity to deliver.
The committee was expected to review not only the current building code, but all legislations affecting the building and construction industry, and came up with comprehensive law or laws to guide the building and construction industry, simplified laws for ease of understanding by the tradesmen, an institutional framework for the implementation of the new laws, draft laws and tough sanctions for breach and errant practices, provision for the registration of buildings to enable or facilitate periodic inspections, inspection of buildings to ensure building plan details are adhered to and appear as approved after completion, means of identifying dangerous buildings, compulsory maintenance of buildings, serious penalties for those who flout waste disposal regulations, measures to enforce control and regulation of advertising, and ways of ensuring relevant professionals are fully involved in the building industry.
The constitutional provision on the right to adequate housing under Article 43B actually puts a lot of emphasis on the need to look at various legislative mechanisms for realizing that constitutional provision. And as a ministry, we have embarked on a series of activities, legislative activities, to try and see how that particular constitutional requirement can be met. Part of the initiatives that we have been engaged in as a ministry is actually looking at the existing laws, trying to reform some of them, trying to introduce measures that would make it easier for both the government and the private sector to realize that constitutional requirement.
Like in most African countries, urbanization in Kenya has been very rapid. The growth in population has put pressure on existing social infrastructure, including housing. This has made construction of more buildings inevitable.
This means that for us, even as we are trying to deal with the fact that urbanization is moving faster than we are moving in terms of constructing new houses, in terms of delivery of services, in terms of houses, then we need to, in our own capacity, check at what do we do to be able to also align ourselves with the new constitution. So number one is to create or to draft laws that will help us align with the new constitution. Number two, under those laws, then we can have several regulations that will regulate the industry. And then number three, we simply just have to go out there and build until we meet the demand.
Many buildings have been constructed without due regard to appropriate planning and building regulations. The current built environment is characterized by dilapidated buildings, dangerous buildings, lack of parking space, lack of recreation areas, the use of substandard building materials, lack of footpaths and ramps for the physically infirm.
The challenge in bringing sanity in the built environment has been the multiplicity of players in the market that tend to have some say but not responsibility over what happens at the end. What the laws that we have been implementing have been resident in various units which are totally independent and do not talk to each other well enough.
The appalling state of the built environment in Kenya invokes sad memories of lives and investment worth billions of shillings lost.
The current situation in the built environment in Kenya is one of serious confusion, chaos. People do whatever pleases them without any respect to the environment, to their neighbors, and even the operations themselves are dangerous to the people who are building, who are constructing. The fundis, the technicians, and anybody visiting the site. Construction industry is not supposed to be that way. The built environment is supposed to be regulated so that those who are involved enjoy, and so that neighbors don't have to quarrel with this new person who is putting up a new building. So we have a real chaotic situation in the public sector, in the private sector, out in our villages, in our marketplaces. Chaos reigns supreme.
In 2006, a high-rise building on Ronald Ngala Street, Nairobi, collapsed, causing the death of 14 people and injuring many others. In June 2011, 2 people died after a 6-story building in Embakasi, condemned for demolition, tumbled. And more recently, in February 2012, panic gripped residents of Kahawa Wendani, fearing the building was on the verge of collapse. These pictures illustrate major impediments to housing delivery, order, harmony, and safety in the built environment. These catastrophes are likely to continue if urgent and appropriate action toward implementation of suitable laws and regulations is not taken. The new constitution has transformed the way every sector operates. It requires that each sector develops the standards which are used as baseline for assessing bills of rights and quality assurance. Article 21(2) empowers the government to take policy and legislative measures necessary for the implementation of Article 42, which provides that every person has the right to clean and healthy environment. And Article 43(1)(b) states that every person has the right to accessible and adequate housing and to reasonable standards of sanitation. The Review and Harmonization Committee, having consulted widely and benchmarked internationally, has come up with a set of laws and regulations which have been subjected to stakeholder scrutiny and gained wide acceptance as the cure for the built environment. These include National Building Regulations, Built Environment Bill 2012, and National Building Regulations Handbook. The Built Environment Bill 2012 seeks to create the institutional framework on how the built environment should be organized and governed.
So the bill tries to put responsibilities to those who are concerned. Today, we have, in this country, we have an architect, we have an engineer, that is a structural engineer as such. These are the main two people who a building depends on for its stability. So there is somebody called accredited checker who has been brought in, and this is where the bill is really coming out strongly, because we want this person to be responsible. Because in most cases, when you find a building coming down, the first person who should be approached to tell us what went wrong should be a structural engineer, whom in this case we have got now called accredited checker. This is the person we are going to hold responsible to tell us what went wrong.
The Built Environment Bill 2012 contains the establishment of the National Building Authority, planning, dimensions, siting and space within and without buildings, building material and workmanship, and inspection of buildings and maintenance.
The implementation of the proposed Built Environment Bill is that it creates a National Building Authority which will be in charge of the implementation of that bill when it becomes an act.
The bill establishes an authority to be known as the National Building Authority, which shall be a corporate body mandated to enforce the provisions of the Act, ensure county governments comply with the provisions of the Act, conduct inspections of all building projects, issue occupation and maintenance certificates, and maintain a register of buildings, advise the Cabinet Secretary on all aspects of physical development and building operations, keep and maintain a register of qualified persons, authorized persons, and accredited checkers, revise and update the built environment regulations at least once in every 3 years, and finally facilitate research, training and development in built environment, and to disseminate information to the public on built environment requirements, promote and coordinate public-private partnership programs in built environment.
There are many tools for implementing the Built Environment Bill. Some of the tools is National Building Regulations, which is an operational document on what exactly should be done in our built environment or in our construction industry. The other is the handbook, which now gives more informed details of what the stakeholders in the construction industry should do so that to achieve a better built environment, which is healthy, which is safe, which is convenient for users, and also which standardizes for different users of our built environment.
The main purpose of these regulations is to ensure that Kenya has a safe, secure, and healthy built environment. The regulations are based on building elements and procedures coded as sections A to U. Each coded section deals with specific building operations and provides severe penalties to offenders of regulations to ensure compliance. These are contained in a handbook that communicates the regulations easily to the users. As Kenya implements the Vision 2030 with a clear vision on functionality of all public facilities and buildings, the efforts of the Ministry of Housing on reforms for safer and attractive built environment must reflect the rights of Kenyans as stipulated in Article 42 of the Constitution that states, "Every person has the right to a clean and healthy environment." The enactment of the Built Environment Bill is expected to be beneficial in terms of reduced building costs, reduced construction period, reduced maintenance costs, streamlined and transparent building designs and plans approval, enhanced accountability, reduced construction claims, enhanced collaboration and coordination, shift from material to performance orientation, and enhanced professionalism and reduction of corruption.
If you look at the growing cities right now, everything to do with housing is very important, because it is that shelter that makes a person. You can only say you live a dignified life if you live in a decent setup. And that decent setup involves a lot of things. It's not just a structure of a house. And that's why when we are setting up all these policies and legislation, we need to have all this in place.
Kenyans desire to live in a safe and attractive environment. This can only be achieved by bringing sanity in the current chaotic building industry. The establishment of a national building authority with a maintenance component shall see this dream come true. Given the wide acceptance by stakeholders in the built environment, the implementation of the proposed laws and regulations as a matter of priority will achieve the desired reforms in the housing sector. Together, we can make the difference.